language. And so, to summarize that in a few sentences is basically impossible to do. But anyway, everything which I'm summarizing in the philosophy of consciousness is just a fragment of the thing, and I'm hoping that it connects the thought process to something, and then you can follow that thought process yourself. If I spend a week concentrating on Heidegger's concept of time, and I try to communicate it in 15 minutes, then obviously either you're going to forget about it immediately and it's going to be meaningless, more or less, or you're going to connect with that stream and you're going to follow it yourself through your own contemplation until you arrive at that grasp which he had and which Sri Aurobindo had, and many others, but the word many has to be taken very conditionally. Many of those who are in a transitional movement, and those people are quite few, I think. So in culture, this time consciousness breaks through in creative moments, because it is creativity. Time consciousness is creativity. This is something which Bergson states very clearly. If we pass out of the rational into the consciousness of temporality, he says, then we are the creativity of the universe. So that's a pretty significant movement. And then one can bring the creativity of the universe into anything which is done. So immortality, what did Sri Aurobindo say in Savitri? He bore the gaze of immortality. So this is a degree of stillness that is beyond our normal rate of metabolism. And so to slow the metabolism in proportion to the increase of conscious energy, the energy of consciousness in relation to the metabolism of the vital metabolism. There's a relational field there, and so this one, as this one gets lower, that one gets higher, and then there's a point of absolute stillness and absolute energy of consciousness. But at that point, one is normally out of the body. Then, to integrate that level of energy back into the functional mind, life, and body complex is a challenge. It is the yogic project. So in history, we know that it has always been a very, very small minority of people who endeavored in that way, along those lines. And then there are a few geniuses, and the word genius comes from that idea of spirit, that sustain those periods somehow in spite of themselves, spontaneously. So in Savitri, there are some passages that convey the consciousness of time in a very specific, deliberate manner. And I'm going to read one of those. In the context of this discussion of the philosophy of consciousness, the mantra is an energetic transmission of a state of being. It's not conceptual. So all of these things which Heidegger is trying to explain systematically, not very rationally, but more or less rationally, actually are beyond the rational mind. This is the thinking which is behind that attempt to explain is a thinking that has passed beyond rational thought. So it's Shruti, it's seeing and hearing a dimension of reality that is accessible to a mind that is highly connected with speech. And the rishis are like that. And so the philosophers are also like that, but at usually a somewhat lower intensity. But then some of the philosophers actually rise to that intensity sometimes. And because Heidegger is dwelling in the Greek language, and he's going outside of modern thinking a lot of the time. He spends outside of the stream of modern thinking, and then he comes back into the stream of modern thinking with that other resonance. And so this, you can see, and if you read a lot of his work, then you can notice this movement in it. And like Sri Aurobindo, very frequently in his writing, he will pass completely into the Vedic Shruti, and you will have paragraphs and paragraphs of inspired writing that hardly is comprehensible. If you really try to think about it, you don't know what he's talking about. But if you hear it, then he conveys something to you that is other than what your mind knows. And then you feel like you've understood something, which is a complete mistake. You haven't actually understood anything. But you've seen something. And that seeing is a knowing. So in Heidegger, there's a phrase which he uses from Parmenides frequently in all of his writing. Which I don't recall exactly in Greek, but he translated it as being and knowing are the same. So in his later writing, he doesn't use the word consciousness very much, and I'll explain that on Thursday night, because the word consciousness has since Hegel has gone in many directions and it means different things in different contexts. So what Heidegger is always conveying is something that he calls knowing. And for him, we know when we are related to what is. Right now, we know what we are hearing and seeing. And it's clear as pie, and nothing could be simpler. And so then his project is to try to understand and explain this phenomenon that we do actually know that which is in our field of knowing, because being and knowing are the same. And so he tries to describe the field in which we are one. And to get away from this idea that we're interpreting our impressions and we're constructing our knowledge and all of that, to try to get away from that, back to the original mystical perception.